In a world where dreams meet reality, there exists a place where your business can flourish. That place is Shopify. Imagine having the power to craft your online store with tools that make it as easy as a gentle breeze. Whether you're an artisan of handmade wonders, a creator of digital treasures, or a curator of the latest trends, Shopify stands by your side. With its customizable templates, seamless integrations, and support that's always there, your dream store is just a heartbeat away. Join millions of visionaries around the globe and let Shopify guide you on your journey. Visit roguemedianetwork.com/Shopify. That's roguemedianetwork.com/SHOPIFY. And embark on your free trial. Shopify, where your commerce dreams come to life. This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on the Payoff, this is like a one for me, right? There's so many for you, but this one is for me because, I love sports. Mike Gibson played 6 years in the NFL. He went to Cal. He's sober 7.5 years. He works in recovery now, and his story is amazing. This is a guy who fought his way to the top, literally, only to give it away or have it stolen, however you want to put it, by drug abuse. And ended up opioids, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ended up losing everything to addiction, and now he has found it all thanks to recovery. It's a pretty cool story. Really cool dude. So Mike Gibson coming up. But first, Kevin Souza. Guest. I'm sober, but I'm sports oriented. So I'm thrilled to talk to you.
I love that.
Yeah. I know a bunch about your career and where you've been. And of course, paramount is, your experience, strength, and hope in the sobriety stuff.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I love the shirt, USA Basketball.
Yeah, I used to. So I worked when, this is years ago. I'm a little older than you. So I graduated college in 99. So okay. I was an intern for USA Basketball, and I did like PR in sports for basketball teams in the NBA. And then I got sober and then got into broadcasting.
Love it.
Yeah.
How do you like the broadcasting component? I mean, it's sports. So
I love it. I do play-by-play, and that kind of is what I always wanted to do. When you were, I know you spent time with the Eagles in 2008. And that was when I worked for the Sixers. I did PR for them. So we sort of overlapped a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who did you had a couple really, who were the offensive linemen on that crew? Do you remember?
Yeah. I had Trey Thomas, John Runyon, Jamal Jackson.
Who was the guard? There was a guard who was the guard with the big personality?
Well, so they had Nick Cole, he was like a short, stocky. They had Max Jean Gillis.
Yeah.
He was massive. I don't even know why they drafted me, to be honest.
But you were a 6th round pick.
Yeah. I had a broken back a back injury that they found during the combine. So I fell a little bit, but
all right, hold on, stop right there. Let's get, because we're going to want to talk about this stuff. All right.
Okay.
So I'm just going to, I'll give an intro and then we'll go right into this conversation.
Cool.
Mike, 6-year NFL veteran, 6th round pick. We were just talking about it, and I stopped you in your tracks because I don't want to use anything up here.
No, you're all good.
I don't want to waste anything early. But you're sober, I guess, 6.5 years now, or around that, 6, 7 years?
Yeah, September 25th, 2017. So coming up here, I'll have 7 years.
Yeah, and so you're working in the recovery industry in San Diego, and you got your T-shirt on there, so it's Legacy?
Yep, Legacy Healing Center. So we're based out of Florida. We have locations in Florida, 2 New Jersey locations, Ohio, and then our most recent location in Hollywood Hills.
Is the guy Mark Efron there at Legacy?
Yep. Yeah, so he's one of the owners.
Yeah, dude, I know that dude. He came on the podcast probably a year and a half ago, and I've kept in touch with him. I spoke on a Legacy meeting not too long ago, like a year and a half ago, maybe around that time. Really? He's a great dude.
Great guy, great speaker, great teacher. really good teacher in that, and then the public speaking atmosphere, which is awesome.
Yeah. All right. So that's so awesome what you're doing today. And your road there, but it wasn't an easy one. It starts, you're a kid, you grow up in Napa, California. It's you, your big brother. Take me into the streets of Napa, California as you're growing up as a young guy.
Yeah. So, I mean, Napa's a great place to grow up. It was. I haven't been back too often, but every time I go back, it's still a great place. Small town for California, small town atmosphere, 2 high schools. Now it's over 100 years old. Great tradition. And just, growing up in a home environment that, my family worked hard, blue collar. Later on in my life, I found out that I had a lot of resentment towards the way that I was brought up, a lot of resentment towards God. And
were you raised Catholic?
What's that?
Were you raised in like Catholic?
Christian.
Okay.
Christian.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of resentment towards God due to the environment that I grew up in. I grew up in a rich town and my family was not rich. There's 2 types of people in Napa. There's the rich Napa that a lot of people see, right? You're driving through the town, you go to the vineyards, the big homes. And then you have Napa, the people of Napa, which is the majority of people, who are hardworking, blue collar people, lower to middle class.
Would you, it's hard to tell your story and not talk about the fact that when I guess you were 2, your mom left home and you grew up with, by all accounts, a great stepmom, but obviously there's, anybody you talk about looking back on your childhood, was that part of the resentment you had, growing up and not having a real relationship with your mom?
Yeah. I mean, just growing, my grandmother was a huge, huge influence on me still to this day. And I'll bring it up later on in my recovery as well. She was feeding me when I was a young child at 2 years old, and then she was feeding me when I was 30 years old.
Yeah. That's how it goes, man. Yeah.
So she's been my guardian angel, my saving grace. I love her to death.
But so looking back though, how did you was there some of that usage of, cause I'm sure there was, right? When you look back at your relationship and not having your mom around as a kid, mm-hmm. was there a lot of pain connected to that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's, growing up in, somewhat of a broken home. My father was always busy. Just like anybody, they have their own issues too. Nobody's perfect. But he always worked hard. So wasn't around very much. It was, some kids, when they went out to play, it was like they had to call their family, let them know where to be. Like my parents didn't care where I went as long as I came home before the street lights turned on. Yeah. We were running amok, doing crazy things as young children, and what I thought normal kids do. But normal kids don't run into Safeways and steal cigarettes because they used to keep the cigarettes out in front before they locked them up. Yeah. So I used to run and go steal cigarettes. My older brother would convince me to do so and stuff like that, putting alcohol by the creek, by the local elementary school by us, and sneaking out and going back to that creek. Bottle's been open for months at this point, and you go back, take a swig. That stuff's not normal.
Dude, but it's so funny. There's so many people, dudes, women, listening to this right now who can totally relate, regardless, because we're addicts and alcoholics. Mm-hmm. I remember I stole statute of limitations, right, Mikey? We're talking, but I remember I stole condoms from which I was not going to use. It was 6th grade, from a pharmacy or something when I was in, I said, 6th grade. And I was holy shit, my brain was exploding with adrenaline, fear. And that's the kind of stuff we do. Normal young kids really don't get, I don't want to say normal, but kids that were like me, or it sounds like you, they didn't do that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember smoking cinnamon sticks.
Yeah.
It might be into a cinnamon stick and you're smoking a cinnamon stick. You know, it's you're 10 years old and you're doing this, something's wrong.
What about your brother? How much older is he than you?
He's 2 years older than I am.
Okay. And so you guys ran the streets a lot together. What kind of an influence was he on you?
He was actually really good. So in high school, I didn't really party. I think I went to one high school party. I was so focused on sports.
Yeah.
Like my grandma will tell you, like, I would cry when they would turn off Monday Night Football when I was a young kid. From the time I was 8 years old, I thought I was going to make it to the NFL. That was my goal. So I was going to do everything I possibly could to make it there. Whatever obstacles stood in my way. Being from Napa, there was literally at the time maybe 2 people from my high school to ever make it to the NFL. Steve Hendrickson, who had a great career, won a couple of Super Bowls. Ed Blanton before me, who had a couple years with the Jets, and he was an offensive lineman. So like that was my ultimate goal, was to make it to the NFL. So my brother's influence that he had on me was going through high school, being older. He always protected me, right? He was a senior and I was a freshman. You would think that he'd beat up on me. No, he would protect me. And I remember, not to throw him under the bus, but like I wanted to smoke weed, right? He's like, okay, cool. Here's a gas mask. And it was like, that was my first time ever smoking weed. And like, I still can't stand the smell of marijuana to this day, but I've had more bad trips on marijuana than anything.
Yeah.
It's like when I wanted to drink, right, he'd be like, all right, dude, here you go. And he would give me the worst of the worst. And so at that point it was like, okay, I hate this, I hate that. Like I wasn't a big fan. And I'd seen like the way that drugs had impacted my family.
Yeah.
And
who in your family, like, cause my family, my dad's side had it real bad. And I kind of saw, my mom was like, hey, you need to watch out for this.
Yeah, exactly. So, on both sides of the family, I'd seen how it impacted my family life. So at that point I was not going to let drugs or anything get in my way. And so, like I said, I went to like one high school party, didn't start drinking until maybe I went to one party in junior college.
Okay.
And then when I got to Cal, right, being a junior college transfer, guys had already been there for 2 years, sometimes 3 years, right, at that point. And here I'm a new guy coming in. So what's the one thing that you do?
Yeah, you drink to hang.
Involved, right? You drink and you hang and you kick it and do all those different things. And so that's kind of when I started picking up the drinking. And
what was that like? Was it like, hey, drinking in the middle of the week, or was it we're drinking after games, like having a few?
Depends. Off season. Okay. Off season after the games, stuff like that. It wasn't too excessive. Holidays, obviously, in college are like a big deal. Halloween, all that stuff. Yeah. And I loved the way that it changed me, right? Like it made me, I'm a pretty socially shy person. I kind of get social anxiety until I get comfortable, and then I'm pretty outgoing. Alcohol would get rid of that. It would make me a very, very social person. Like I was the life of the party, picking people up, doing crazy stuff like that.
Were you like the kind of guy, like on the field, you're a warrior, but then off the field, you're kind of like a gentle giant, like at the party and having fun. Yeah. Cause that picking people up is like, you're picking up little guys who are your buddies, like, and everybody's loving it.
Yeah. The best compliment I got, I was with the Seahawks, and it was my second year there. And the best compliment that I received, was from Red Bryant, and we had just gotten in a fight in training camp, and they're like, Gibby, like, we love you off the field, but on the field, we hate you. And that's just how I was. I was smaller, like that's the way. When I was 8 years old, I was playing with 10-year-olds. When I was a freshman, I was playing with the seniors, so I've always been scrappy. I've always been taught, like, play to the whistle, whatever it takes. If you're dirty, so be it.
Well, you grew up in Napa, close to Oakland. Did you ever have any exposure? I know the Raiders training camp was out there.
Yeah. So the Raiders used to practice in our hometown in Napa.
They stayed at the Marriott, right? They played right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was at my middle school.
No way.
So in between the two fields, right? So you have the field's actually at the middle school, and then they have the hotel, which is like right here, right? And then they have the fields right here, and then they have a little walkway.
Yeah.
And so you would stand out there and get autographs from the players, and I would stand out there every day. Rich Gannon, Tim Brown, all those guys coming through. You have to wait for those guys because they're always the last ones off the field. But I loved it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. To just the whole Raider mystique and all that shit's unbelievable. So you end up going to Cal, and I guess you went there. You played with, I think you played for Jeff Tedford, right? Yeah.
Which was great.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know his story, but very similar upbringing to me. And then he's a junior college guy. I was a junior college guy. So Teddy was great. I mean, I loved him, and Coach Mahalchek, who was my offensive line coach, at the time stepped up and was like a father figure to me. I still talk to him to this day.
Yeah. And so like you're at Cal, you're playing for Tedford. You guys are pretty good. Your identity, this is what I wanted to ask you. I got sidetracked. Your identity as a football player, how much were you tied to that? Looking back now, where it's like, because you kind of, I can draw a similarity to you and your dad. You're both busting your ass, right? Like working hard. That's exactly what because you kind of maybe saw it in him. So you knew to get it done. You're working your ass off to become this football player. Were you tied to that coming up?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's in terms of like my work ethic, that's kind of that's like Napa High football in a nutshell. It was like the guys that coached me played with my dad or coached my dad. Right. So it was like, and my uncle as well. My uncle was a great athlete, state champion wrestler. And so the expectation that was there, that's what we're a bunch of slow white kids from Napa.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, we have no other choice than to play hard. We're not fast. We're not the most athletic people. We got to be scrappy. And my freshman year, we weren't good. My sophomore year, we weren't good. The next 2 years, we were great. But for those 2 years, I mean, I think we won a total of 4 games in my first 2 years. But teams knew they knew who they played. They may have beat us 45-0, but at least they were somewhat beat up. That's kind of how we had to play. And it ended up paying off, for my junior and senior year, we had really good seasons. And then being junior college guy, like I always had to earn it.
Yeah.
Always had to earn it. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. I think people who have to earn it are a little bit more hungry as opposed to people who have been told that they're the best all the time.
Yeah. And that hunger when you're a Cal, you get drafted in the 6th round. Now we were talking before this started and I freaked out because I didn't want you to tell a good story before. But one thing I want to ask you, were there any consequences at Cal with your drinking?
No, I never had any issue. Like I said, I was so focused.
Yeah.
It was kind of during the season after the game, have a couple of drinks, but never excessive. I can remember Halloween, at the very end of the season, like a few times, getting blacked out drunk. But other than that, I can specifically remember drinking Payoff vodka out of white coffee cups because we didn't, you couldn't afford anything better and you couldn't get anything better in terms of, drinking glasses at the time. So it's definitely not like it is today with NIL. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I was about to say, you said it. So you get to the combine. What was that like? You get done playing, your season's finished. You're going to, put your name in for the draft. What's that process like? And take us through, like, I guess some of the stresses of that. Did you lean on substance at all? Or were you like, I'm going to get drafted. I'm doing 1,000% what's good for my body? Yeah.
I mean, other than that, for the first time that I had smoked weed, like at the time I had never even tried an illicit drug. I had one shoulder surgery at that point, hated the pain meds, took it for one day, started throwing up and never took them again. The process transitioning from college to the combine, I didn't play in my bowl game this senior year, the Armed Forces Bowl. I actually had 2 concussions within a 6-day period. One against University of Washington, and then the next one against Stanford. It was one of those things where I wasn't going to sit out a game against Stanford. So I ended up playing the whole game against Washington. Don't remember. I got kicked in the head. Don't remember playing basically the whole game, and then went into Stanford week. Didn't practice all week, and then I got another concussion. And so at that point, it was like, look, if I get another one, like there's a chance that I may not even get drafted at all.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the red flags for me at the combine. Was I had the 2 concussions, that were recorded. And then I had the back injury. I had the, what do they call it? and where the very bottom vertebrae just snapped off.
So it's a broken back, really, is what it is.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
And I've never had surgery. I've never had anything to fix it. I've kind of been going ever since.
Yeah.
So at that point, I went to Atlanta to train for the combine. Was still having some back pain. That's kind of what started it all. And then once you get to the combine, man, they poke and prod.
At this point, by the way, going into the combine, were you like a top 3 round guy?
Yeah, I was projected like a 3rd, 4th round.
Okay.
I had 2 solid years. I was second team All Pac-10, behind Sam Baker, who was, an All-American. And I was playing, right and left tackle. I wasn't necessarily, I was athletic, but I wasn't like stereotypical.
Yeah, Pac-10 left tackle. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. I was smart. I was scrappy. So when I got to the NFL, everybody saw me as an interior lineman. But I'd never played interior line.
But that's what they do. I mean, that's the mentality. We can turn this guy into a guard. And maybe that's why you do fall a little bit, because I've heard a guy say once, I forget, but it was a front office guy, like a guard is a guard is a guard. Like we can take a left tackle or right tackle and turn him into a guard. So you're one of those guys, but you fall a little bit, but I mean, dude, you're a 6th round pick. And what's your experience like? Now you enter camp, I guess, and with Philly, the Eagles take you, and you all do have these injuries now. Like, take me through the injuries and how the substance finally came into play and started to kind of dominate. Yeah,
so it's interesting. My first training camp, you go through mini camps, OTAs, and stuff like that. You're not in full pads. And this is the old CBA. So Andy Reid under the old CBA, like you're in double days, full pads, 4 to 5 hours a day in Lehigh Valley. Now, as a California kid, never experiencing humidity, it was miserable, absolutely miserable. Honestly, I didn't think that I was cut out for it. I remember doing one-on-ones in Kimo von Oelhoffen, right? And Kimo was in like his 12th or 13th year at the time.
He was with the Bengals for a long time. He was awesome.
And he picks me up and throws me. And I'm like, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. So stuck with it. Would I have made the roster that year? I probably would have been a practice squad guy. Luckily, I got hurt. And I say luckily because financially within your contract, you have a split, right? So instead of making practice squad money, you actually make half your contract, which isn't bad. So I had a shoulder injury, shoulder surgery. Once again, took pain medication, never had an issue. It wasn't until I got into Seattle, which was my 2nd year in Seattle, my 3rd year overall, and training camp again. Alex Gibbs was the offensive line coach, and who was like a legend, right?
Yeah.
That guy was the man. And
he was at Denver for a long time, right?
Denver for a long time, Redskins for a while. He's like the creator of the zone scheme.
Yep.
So it was perfect. I fit his system perfectly.
You started 3 years in Seattle?
I was there for three years, but I started 1 full season, 2 playoff game.
Okay.
So I ended up on wet grass slipping and then dislocating my hip, essentially subluxing it so that it pops out and then pops back in. And Alex had just named me the starter. And so I'm like, there's 0 chance I'm getting surgery on this. And so I never had surgery. And so the team just provided medication, so, I mean, I just took what they told me. It's nothing that they did. It was my choice. The pain meds just stopped working. And so I went to my doctor back home, and then eventually started getting them from the street. I didn't start getting them from the street. So we ended up having, so I was taking them daily.
Yeah. Walk me through the situation where you flunk a drug test.
Yeah. I was just going to talk about that.
Yeah. Tell me that's mind blowing, dude. It really takes people behind the curtain of the NFL. But the familiarity with addiction is still there. And the sort of like the entree into, I don't quite know what this is, but I need it.
Yeah. So we ended up having the lockout. And so the lockout, you couldn't have any communication with the team. You couldn't have any communication with anybody in the organization. So go home during the off season. I'm still getting the stuff from my doctor and am abusing it. I mean, I was definitely taking it daily, as prescribed. Sometimes I would take less. I wasn't at the extent that I was probably my last 2 years. It definitely wasn't that, but I was getting to that point. And so the lockout ended. And so they're like, hey, basically you have to show up tomorrow. And so I knew I was going to be drug tested within the next few days. But I had a valid prescription from my doctor that I brought from home. I handed it to my, training staff and said, this is what I take, and they totally okay with it. They record it, yada, yada, yada. Bam, I get drug tested like 2 days later. And then I get a FedEx in the mail like 3 weeks later. And it's like, hey, you failed the drug test. You're in the NFL drug program. So I'm like,
so you're in camp for 3 weeks and then you find out? Okay.
Yeah. So in training camp, they just send you a FedEx, right? So you get a FedEx in the mail. It just sits in your locker. And so you read it. And so I take it to my trainers and I'm like, yo, like, what's up with this? And they have no idea. So what had happened is when you get a prescription from an outside doctor or from your team, that is supposed to be a 30-day prescription, which is what I got. I got drug tested on day 31. So, but the team hadn't written me my new prescription yet.
Okay.
So they had written me one for the next day after the test. Yeah. So there's literally 1 day that I had been tested. So I got thrown in the drug program. Now, this is the interesting part, right? So cool, whatever. I petition it, I appeal it. So I'm in the drug program for 3 to 4 months. And this is what I now understand is the phenomenon of craving, right? So for 3 to 4 months, I didn't take anything, but I thought about it every second, every day, all day, before practice, after practice, when I woke up in the morning, like I couldn't stop thinking about it. At the time, my ex-wife, she's in recovery as well. She's killing it. But at the time she was in her active addiction as well. So like I'm sitting next to somebody, sleeping next to somebody, I'm around somebody who's currently doing what I can't stop thinking about. So I passed every drug test. My appeal went through. And I can still remember it. I'm sitting at home, or I'm sitting in the locker room. I got the FedEx saying, hey, you're out of the drug program. And so I asked a roommate of mine, and I said, hey, like, I know we have some stuff in the house. What do you got? And he's like, well, I got one of these little blue pills, which ended up being, it's an Oxycontin 30.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I've never taken that before. It seems like a lot. I go home, take it, throw up all over the place, fell in love. And from that point on, for the next, 10 years, it was off to the races from that.
How are you functioning in the NFL on these drugs?
For me, they gave me energy. It was weird. My last 2 years, I was taking 30s a day. I would take 10 for breakfast, 10 for lunch, 10 for dinner.
Yeah.
10 in the morning. I'd take 5 at halftime, take 10 when I got home. It just wasn't. I could function on them.
I finished up. See if you can relate to this. I finished up Brett Favre's book not too long ago, and when he was at the height of his opioid addiction, he had his best season because he was literally fearless. He had the energy, I guess, that you're talking about. And he just took chances, and he was on a different level. Now, of course, guy can't take a shit, and they got to take him to the hospital because of all the opioid stuff. And his home life is miserable, but I mean, hey, like, and I can only imagine what that's like. The incentive is through the roof for you.
Yeah. I mean, you never know who you're getting them from. You're ordering them off the street. When I was in Arizona, I'd have them shipped to Arizona, my house in Arizona. From multiple different states, driving to a FedEx location, showing up late for a meeting, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I was always, like a company guy. I was always on time, with the exception of things like that. Like I would always practice, but days that I didn't have everything I needed, I'd have my wife at the time drive to the facility, drop them off. I'd meet her in the parking lot so that she could pick them up so I wouldn't be late. sick. Oh, I got the flu. I can't practice. And then all of a sudden I feel better. Okay, cool. Let's go practice.
Yeah.
That was basically my last 2 years in Arizona in a nutshell.
Anybody like around you, like on the team or coaches or anybody catching on? Now, you did one thing interesting about your career. So you played for 5 different head coaches in 6 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
So that's almost, nobody really gets to know you that well. No staff particularly can hone in maybe on exactly who you are, because that league is so big, and there's a lot of turnover, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think nobody noticed anything. Like I said, I was always pretty good. I'd always come, in shape, ready to play during the season. I'd pass all my conditioning tests. Like I said, a company guy, I'd always come in, bust my ass. I would always work hard. I was always smart, right? That's the only reason why I stuck around so long, my first 2 years was just basically learning how to play at that level. And then it was like, okay, what can we do to better ourselves? So played both left and right guard. And then Coach Cable came in. And then at that point, it was like, the man's a genius, right? The best X's and O's offensive line coach I played for. And okay, cool. What do I got to do to stay around? He's like, you should learn to play center. Cool. Right. Learn to play center. It kept me around for an extra 2 years.
Wow.
And probably if I wanted to keep on playing after that, it probably would have kept me around longer.
Well, yeah, dude, you kind of walked away in a sense. Like what? So what's going now? Was that like insanity and ego, or was that just, it was time to go? Because like I had Thomas Henderson on this podcast. Now this is different because he talks about, he was really wrapped up in cocaine. And after a game against the Redskins where, he was benched for doing something, he walks into Tom Landry's office just off the walls on coke. And it's just like kind of, hey, here's how it's going to be. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. And he got caught like shortly after that, if not immediately, if not the next day. Was your mind like just kind of kidnapped by these drugs, or was there a real situation there looking back?
No, I think my issue was this, is at that point I'd played in over 100 games.
Yeah.
And I'd been busting my butt. Now, what a lot of people don't know is, and I have to explain to people quite often, is like, if you're not on the active roster week 1 as a vested veteran, like your salary is not guaranteed. Right. And I only had that basically 2 years of my career.
Yeah. But you were on the final roster for the other, like 3 or 4 more.
Right. Exactly.
So you're fighting every day for your life.
Yeah. If you're not on that active roster, they can cut you and bring you back. And there was 1 year in Arizona where it was my first year in Arizona, where like 3 weeks in a row, they'd cut me on Friday. Right. I'd stay at home during the game, and then they would sign me back to the active roster Monday, and they would do it week after week after week. Right. And it's like, you don't really know if you're going to be there or if somebody's going to pick you up off waivers. Like, you don't know what's going on.
Wow.
Right. That's stressful. Not knowing if you're going to, they say they're going to sign you back on Monday, but you're like, are you really going to sign me back on Monday? Or am I just going to be sit here with my piece in my hand, so you got to trust them. In a not so trustworthy league.
And you have to, like we talked about, like your experience, I guess it was with Seattle when you talked about that with Coach, like you had that injury with your hip, but you're not going to sit out. You're going to do whatever you can to stay available. What's like life at home like during all this? I know your ex-wife, she went to Georgia. She played sports there as well, played softball. And then you guys both end up, your words, not mine, but you were a little worse off than she was. But you guys are both in full-blown addiction together. I've lived with another addict at a point in my, it's crazy, dude. It can.
No, it was chill at that point. At that point it was, why? Because we had the finances to fund it.
Yeah.
It's like we very rarely went without. So that wasn't an issue. So it basically kept everything normal. It kept everything calm. It wasn't until afterwards when, money starts running dry or resources start running dry. Right. And at that point you start arguing and fighting and doing all that stuff.
Before we bounce back up and talk about, where you are today and your story of recovery, what was the last period like? You hang it up, you walk away from the game, and now here you are. You're now this guy. You're not a football player anymore, even though you always will be, but you're not getting paid.
Right.
right? And
Right.
and that's been your one job, I'm guessing, for your whole life.
Yeah, since I was 8 years old. You know, you talk about ego, right? So like, we'll go back a little bit.
Yeah.
So what kept me from not re-signing or sticking around and going to another team was my ego, right? Like I said, I played in over 100 games. I'd started 18 whatever games, playoff games, whatever. Mind and other guys who played in 20 games, started 10 games, they're getting paid $3 to $4 million a year. You know, when at the end of that season in Arizona, when they asked me, "Hey, we want to retain you, what's it going to take?" I said, "Hey, just guarantee I just want my salary guaranteed. You could give me minimum. I don't care. I just want it guaranteed." And then not having that call to my agent saying, "Hey, we want to re-sign him," you know, was frustrating. And so the only calls I got were like, "Hey, here's an invite to training camp, you know, for a couple $100." And I'm like, why am I going to go kick my own ass for a couple $100 with the opportunity to not, you know, make the money that I want, or just to get cut, just to get brought back and bounce around and do all that. Which, do I regret that? I don't really know if I do or not. I had an opportunity later on with the Falcons. I'd kind of been planning what I wanted to do when football was over. I've been going on ride-alongs with my buddy Russell Fitzpatrick with the Napa Sheriff's Department, Sheriff's Office, for a couple of years at that point. And so that's what I was going to do. My uncle was a sheriff. My grandfather was a sheriff. And so once I basically, you know, retired, I went into the police academy in Santa Rosa. And yeah, graduated and was class president, getting loaded every day, Oxycontin, Adderall. So, but yeah, I mean, I passed the polygraph and got hired. So
you were a police officer for an amount of time.
Yeah, I was a sheriff in Napa County, patrolling. I was on the street. Yeah.
No shit. No, what was that like?
It was interesting, you know, coming from football to that. It wasn't for me. Mm-hmm. At the time, there was a lot going on in society. I thought I could change the world, change the way that policing happened.
Yeah.
You know, I thought, I'm only one person, but I thought that.
Yeah.
So definitely interesting. I mean, I had a lot of respect for police officers then. Now, so obviously more than ever that I've done it. And like I said, it's a family. But it's a tough job.
Oh my God. I can't even imagine. And you're doing it on that roller coaster of substance. And, you know, you meant, right? I mean, and how much was alcohol part of everything at this point, Mike?
I never was a big alcohol guy. It just, for me, it ruined the other part of my high, right? The oxy, the Adderall, like it ruined that aspect of it. So I never really drank.
So
drinking for me,
what was that? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
An issue.
Oh, so it was pretty much substance, not. I mean, the drugs, not so much alcohol.
Correct.
So you end up going to treatment 6 times. What does it take? How do you hit bottom? Like, you're even honestly, dude. The retired guy that's the sheriff of Napa County is still like, fuck, that's pretty awesome. Like, so how do we go from there? I mean, at least on paper it is, right? What you're doing to yourself and what's happening at home, only you and God know. And sometimes that's the worst, right? Yep. But like, but from my experience, you're going to string together success for so long. When you got this full-blown, full-time addiction, what happens where you're brought to your knees?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, like I said, I was able to hang on for the first year, 2 years after I retired. And the one thing I struggled with was, you know, obviously my identity, and who I was as a person, what I was going to do, and who I am. And it took, I mean, for 5 treatments, I went because of other people. The last time I went because of myself. I kind of had to. I mean, at that point, had sold my house in Napa. I mean, I didn't have a car. I couldn't get a bank account. I had 2 bags of clothes.
I'm over here. I'm like, check. I mean,
yeah, 1 bag of shoes from my Nike contract, right? So I had a bunch of like sick Jordans and other things, right, that were actually worth some decent money. And then I had some clothes, right? But I was balling. And I had just gotten kicked out of my sober living for relapsing.
And where was your ex-wife during all this? Was she just like, hey, I can't, was she trying to clean her own thing up? I mean, we're not trying to go into her whole thing, but what does this do to your relationship?
Yeah. So at the time we were actually going through a divorce as well. And then she went to treatment, and then I ended up going to treatment for the last time. And for me, I went to an all men's faith-based program here in San Diego. It's not open anymore. It's called Genesis Recovery. It was on 160 acres, generators and well water, 6 people to a room. I was on a top bunk, a twin mattress. Previous to that, I'd been to, these big giant $20 million homes where they, private chefs, the whole nine. And so this last place, like, you had to do chores. I didn't have my cell phone, right? No cell phones. You had one TV, but there was no cable. So you could watch movies. And you're on 160 acres, man. You have chores, you have dishes, you have to make your bed, you have to clean your room, you have to do the other 5 times. Like, I had people doing that for me.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't for me. That just was what I needed. I didn't need all that stuff. I didn't need people hyping me up, telling me who I am and I'm the end all be all. I needed, there was a cook there who was like 21 years old who'd gone through the program, and I'll never forget it. He goes, I'm sitting there sweeping the floor, and he's like, damn, dude, from having maids to cleaning my house. And I'm like, I just wanted to beat him up,
Yeah.
But it was the truth. It was like, they didn't care who I was. They didn't care what I had previously done. They just cared about me and who I was as a person. Because in reality, that's all I was at the time. Like, I had no money. I couldn't get homeless. Technically, I didn't have my name on a lease. I didn't own a home, right? Carless. I didn't have any vehicle. Like I said, I couldn't get a bank account. So I spent 4 months up there, and my sponsor worked up there. Steve A is my sponsor. He's still my sponsor to this day. The total opposite of me, right? And Steve spent multiple years in prison, tattoos on his neck. I'm like, there's no way I'm having this guy sponsor me. And he saved my life, right? He held me accountable. So I did the 12 steps of Narcotics Anonymous in that program. I showed up every day. My counselor at the time, he's like, look, man, he's like, if you treat Narcotics Anonymous like you did your football career, you're going to be a professional at that too. And that just really resonated with me. So I set up a schedule every morning, get up at 6, right? Do my step work for an hour, go to the gym. After the gym, come back, eat breakfast, start groups. By the time that I graduated that program, I was sponsoring people that were still in the program. And then they asked me to work there, which if you'd have told me that I'd be working in treatment for, I think it was like $12.50 an hour at the time, like, I'd have told you were crazy.
Yeah.
And then I lived in a double wide trailer. They had a trailer up there that I paid $100 a month. Right?
But see what you're telling me, dude, it's the beauty. Cause I was like a long-term recovery guy too. I went to a treatment center, and then I went to a halfway house for like 5 months where, I worked at KFC, did all the shit that you're talking about, all the chores. And then I lived with another sober dude for like another year. And it was just like, dude, that was what I needed. Like, and I'm not like preaching to anybody, but like, that's where I found sobriety. Like, literally willing to go to any lengths. Like, what the fuck does it matter if I live like in the neighborhood I want to live in around the people I live in, if I'm going to die, there's no, it's about time to start following suggestions and do, like, I'm sure somebody told you, hey, you should probably stick around here. You should probably, and you fucking finally started following directions.
Yeah, exactly. I always say, like, your ego isn't your amigo. Right. And for me, my pride, my ego, terminally unique, right? You've probably heard that term, right? Like, I thought I was terminally unique. Nobody had gone through what I'd gone through, and nobody could relate to me, right? When in reality, it's me. I was looking at the differences, not the similarities that I had with people.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until that changed, right, that things started to get better. I'm a big mental health, right? I'm a huge advocate that, the alcohol and the drugs are just a symptom of ourselves, right? So, like, we're struggling with mental health. We're struggling with depression. mine was a lack of identity, right? Anxiety, lack of identity, depression, right? And so until I was able to fix those three things, the alcohol and the drugs were always going to be there. So once you take the drugs apart, take the drugs away, right? And then once you start working on yourself, once you start loving yourself, you understand who you are as a person, what your character defects are, and recognizing those, or having somebody else point them out for you, which my sponsor does often.
Yeah.
Right? So
I heard a guy once say, hey, if you ask me to sponsor you, you've just given me the right to take your inventory.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So once I was able to fix those things, and, there's still a constant work in progress. I'm working on it every day. Recovery is a full-time job. And I think a lot of people don't understand that and aren't willing to go through the fire for that. But the gifts of it are amazing. I never thought within a 7-year span that I would be able to gain the things and more, right? Like, I never thought I'd own another home after what I did. I never thought I would be able to drive a nice car. Those, sure, I may not have 3 or 4 cars or, a multi-million-dollar home or whatever.
But that's the shit we tell ourselves. Like, I'm never going to be able to do that. It's never going to.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's just like, it happens very slowly, right? I mean, it's not overnight. How did you find, because I'm talking to you now, you're living life like a loose shirt. Like, you're just very easygoing. How did you find yourself and realize that was like really an awesome version of you, and that was perfect?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. How did I find myself? Well, I kind of had to reinvent myself, right? Like, I'd always been Mike, the football player, but understanding that that's not who I am. It's it's what I did, and it's a fraction of who I am, but it's not who I am as a person. Like, what is my legacy? What is my destiny? Right. So I'm here to help people, that's what I'm put on this planet to do. Football was just a thing. So for me, in understanding, humility, like I said, I went from owning a home to living in a double wide trailer on a dirt farm. And I did that for a year. I was on food stamps. I drove a car that I drove back in high school, and being able to reestablish those things and going through the steps, you hear in the rooms, the fear of financial insecurity will disappear and all these different things. And I don't know if that'll ever disappear. Like, that's always going to be there. But being able to gain the gifts of recovery that I've been able to give back. And like I said, and then some, the most important thing there is relationships. Yeah. One thing I really struggled with when I retired was the lack of relationships that I had established with people. When you retire from the league, you think that you're going to talk to these players that you played with forever. Yeah. And you don't. They have lives too. Yeah. I still talk to a few of them, but I got to be proactive, or they got to be proactive in order to, it's a two-way street. Yeah. We check in on people, say, hey, how you doing? But it's not like this constant thing. And then there's relationships that I've tried to make amends for, and it's not working out. Yeah. They didn't accept the apology, so I just got to make a living amends. So really reinventing myself, I think was a huge thing in terms of why I lack so much identity, and finding out who I was as a person. And it's still 38 years old, and I'm still finding out.
Dude, what you told me about the fear of financial insecurity, will leave us. I can relate in a sense where it's daily, right? Like, it's a daily reprieve. Like, I got to practice this stuff daily. So every 24 hours I have that, I lose that fear of financial insecurity. You know what I mean? But then tomorrow I got to do the same stuff I did yesterday because it worked. Yeah. I'm never going to and it's beautifully frustrating, right? But I'm never graduating from this thing. Like, I'm always the day that I think I've got it, the next day is usually when I'm about to get my ego checked. you know,
Yeah.
or later on that day, you know? Yeah.
Real quick.
I've heard you talk too about the NFL and they're, you know, every big ass corporation is still kind of in the dark on this stuff. So it's not an indictment on the NFL, at least from where I'm sitting, but like, have you made any progress connecting with the NFL Players Association or with the NFL so people are, you know, more aware that there is there's resources out there. There's dudes like you. Like I would imagine some of the guys that you talk to from the NFL. I'm sure at some point, dude, you're going to have, you know, several guys. Just that's how life works in any profession. Reach out that are needing help. That's what's happened for me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely have had that. Individuals coming in, and sometimes it happens organically. Sometimes, you know, they call in or sometimes it's somebody else at another treatment center that, you know, my friends call me that I work with and they're like, hey, like we have a guy, we want you to come talk to him. You know, he'll be able to relate to you. You can relate to him. He thinks that he's different than everybody else and he needs somebody to talk to. All right, cool. When do you want me there? You know, get in the truck and drive over there. You know, in terms of the NFL's tough, the NFLPA is tough, man. It's like the Pentagon. You know, and they only have one treatment center on their website. I've made multiple attempts to try to do speaking engagements, you know, to become a resource for them, just to no avail.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know why.
Well, you're not the only guy I've heard say that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right? Yeah. So I can't get inside there. I have no idea how that works with them, but it's interesting. I mean, for sure. And the fact of the matter is, like guys like you out there carrying the message, that is a lighthouse, regardless of whether you're inside the room today or whether hopefully guys like you and, you know, the dude Randy Grimes or Hollywood Henderson or Tony Mandrich or Ryan Leaf, you know, those are all dudes that have, you know, they walk the walk like you today. And they make recovery look fun and make it look great. All right. So you got divorced. So that's gotta be tough, but it's the kind of shit that we do in life that's difficult, you know? Yeah. Like, how are you doing? Like, share as much or as little as you want about that. Like how you're able to walk through life. Cause I know you mentioned it, dude, the way it seems like you're in a very healthy spot. Cause you said my ex-wife, she's crushing it in recovery. But, you know, you just, I guess, had to go your separate ways.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we were together for 16 years.
Yeah.
You know, we've been together since we were 15 years old. And great woman. We just grew apart.
Yeah.
And, you know, we got back together after going to treatment. We lived separately for a year, moved back in with each other, and it was perfect for us at the time. But it's been difficult, you know, for me, really having to reset, you know, getting stuck with myself for the first few months. You know, it was brutal going from my house with, you know, 2 dogs, 2 cats to a 500 square foot studio.
Yeah.
You know, and sitting there by myself, you know, it was really lonely. But the beauty in that was the rooms.
Yes.
You know, I was able to I was hitting up usually 1 to 2 meetings a day.
Yeah, dude, that's what I did when I got sober and I was out of the refined recovery system, right? Whether it was an extended care or rehab before that. And I was like, look, man, I was on fire. I would just go to 2 meetings a day. If there was time, there were times when I went to 3. And like that's more powerful than I think we allow ourselves, because that is an ego thing, right? 3 meetings a day. What's wrong with you? It's like, no, dude. Sure. What I got, I want to keep going. And so like that fire, I could use some of that stuff today.
Yeah. And at the time, like I wasn't the poster child for recovery, right? Like I would go do H&Is, and I was going to, you know, maybe 1 meeting a week at that point. But the rooms are always going to be there. They're always going to be there with open arms and accepting me, going to new meetings, meeting new people. And, you know, it was great. It was, if I was sitting at home and I was bored, there was nothing to do. It was like, all right, man, let's go to a meeting. And not because I wanted to drink or drug. Like those weren't the issues. It's because I was literally by myself.
Yeah.
You know, and it's humbling, you know, it's humbling at that point, you know, struggling with my mental health. I went back to seeing a psychiatrist, you got back on medication.
But welcome to the human race. I mean, I'm just saying, like, and that's where we got it. And I know you're on this team, but like, we got to smash that stigma. Like, and I know it's probably harder for a high profile, ex NFL football player, because it just is, I would imagine. To admit, like, okay, I admitted I'm an addict. Now I admit that I need mental health. Now I admit that but it's like, that's how you get well. Those are the strongest people out there that take those steps.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people, like, closed mouths don't get fed.
Yeah.
So but like, it's understanding that, like, hey, like, my ego's getting in the way. And if I don't check my ego, like the way my mental health was at the time, like, I don't know where I'm going to be at in a week.
Yeah. 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 That's the reality of it, though.
Like, I'm so lonely. It's like, I need to get help, and I need to get help now.
Yeah.
And luckily, working in the field, like, I was able to pull together the resources quick. Within the next day, I was able to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And get on medication. And like I said, I'm still on medication to this day. I have no shame in saying that.
No.
So I still talk to the person, my psychiatrist, once a month.
Yeah.
And it's a great relationship. And, I'm like, I don't see myself stopping that anytime soon.
No, but that's an inspiration, dude. And I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, but like that, like, I need to hear that in a sense where it's just kind of like, yo, if I keep feeling this way, I don't know that's a great way of putting it, because it's a scary reality. I don't know what's going to happen in a week. I was in a situation where living with this woman, and it was like not going well. And this is like 2 years ago. And I was 100% moving closer to a drink, like the whole time. And it was, again, like, it's like I'm accountable. I put myself there, whatever, but I know the way out too. And it's talking to other dudes in recovery, and it's talking to, whether it's a psychologist or a therapist, getting on meds, whatever it is for people to follow direction, right, to that freedom. But it's hard. Yeah. Simple, not easy, dude.
That phone gets so heavy, though.
Well, dude, I'm taking the words out of your mouth. I heard you say there's better alternative, that 1,000-pound phone, as opposed to the 1,000-pound phone calling a dealer or somebody.
Yep. Yeah. That phone gets heavy, though, quick. I know that.
All right, so let me let you out of here with this. Well, I got a couple. What's your favorite football memory? Like, and I want to hear something like off the field, like a camaraderie thing, or because stuff that happens in that locker room is crazy, but it's also magical, And anything stick out? Any stories that you could share? Any one story?
Yeah, I mean, there's like, that's the one thing that I miss, right? Is like the off seasons, mini camp, when you're there for mini camps and OTAs, right? Because it's, you do a little bit of football, but you have a lot of fun. So I have a Costa Rica trip. That was a blast. It was an amazing trip. Won't go into detail too much on that one, but we'll go back to Halloween party at Cal. We're doing keg stand. That's the night that we're drinking the pop-off out of their white coffee cups. So you can't tell how much you're pouring in there. And we're doing keg stands in a bed. God, I don't even know whose room it was. We were in a bedroom doing keg stands. A couple offensive linemen. And in walks this cop, a female cop. And it was like, oh, look at that costume. It's a beautiful girl. And we're like, look at that costume. Like, take it off. We're talking. She's like, no, this is real. And we're like, no, it's not. Come on. And so they end up telling like the girls that were there, like, hey, like, you need to calm them down. They're being loud. And so it's boom, they disappear. Right. 5 minutes later, knock on the bedroom door again. It's the same female cop. Right. And it was like, we had never seen her before. And it was like, who brought the girl with the costume? And she ended up being a real cop. And she was really cool. But that was a fun one, just getting together with the guys, it's guys, we're just meatheads. We're stupid, you get drunk.
Totally. That's what, and
we go in a triangle and we start slapping each other. I slap, and then he slaps that guy. He slaps, we can hit each other the hardest and make each other quit. Before you know it, somebody's got a chipped tooth. And
how loud was it in Seattle? You were on the field for Marshawn Lynch's run against the Saints. Like, what the hell was that like, dude?
Yeah. So the 37 pop, right? So like it's a nickel power play. I always I was in on that play, so I pulled around and people are like, "Oh, is that you running down the field?" I'm like, "No, that's Tyler Plumbus, right?" Like, "Where are you at?" I'm like, "I'm back there on the ground." But yeah, I mean it's such a memorable. I mean, I went to college with Marshawn. A lot of the guys on that team, I think we had 6 Cal guys on that team. So being able to do that play in particular was probably single-handedly like obviously the most memorable moment that I have playing that and playing at Lambeau. That was my first game where I actually like suited up and played was at Lambeau. But that Beastquake run, pretty incredible and couldn't happen to a better person.
How awesome is Marshawn Lynch? He just seems like the greatest.
The funny thing is like, that's how he's been ever since I met him. Like that's how he is on and off the field. He's funny. He's charismatic. He's not going to change who he is for somebody else. Very smart. People think because of where he's from and how he talks that he's not very smart. No, he's a very smart person. And he's got great people surrounding him. But yeah, that play was nuts. I don't even remember how loud it was. Because you're kind of just going through it and you don't really know what's going on. And like I said, I hit him. I ended up number 22. I ended up hitting him and Marshawn ended up throwing him. So I tell people all the time that I was the fluffer for that guy. So I was just a fluffer.
22, I think that was the dude. He had a bunch of picks the year before. He was a really good DB. I forget his name. Maybe it's Thomas or something. Yeah. He was awesome.
Yeah. So Marshawn ended up tossing him. So I just go, I was just a fluffer for him, and so just kind of see it and being on the ground and looking up and like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like this is really happening. With the year that we had, the funny thing is going into that game in New Orleans, we played them like 3 weeks earlier in New Orleans and they beat us, but we were so confident in who we were as a team at home. We knew we were going to beat them when they came to us. There was no doubt about that. Not in that fashion.
Yeah.
And so going to Chicago the next week, they weren't like an overly strong team. And I think injuries that game just ended up getting the best of us.
I could talk to you about this stuff forever. Last thing, Mike Gibson, last thing. What do you tell people? Because you get to tell. I'm not even asking you to pontificate here. You deal with guys in early recovery all the time now. I mean, you are on the front lines. You'll go pick people up, whatever. What do you tell them when they say, hey, this is a hopeless effort of mine. This is a fool's errand. I'm never going to get this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few things, right? Like, well, have you ever tried it? Well, give it a chance. I tell me doing the steps was out of spite, right? So like I tried everything. So it's like, I'm going to do the steps of Narcotics Anonymous because I don't think they work. And I'm going to prove people wrong. I'm going to prove that they don't work. And then I'm just going to go out and I'm going to die a drug addict. Like that was my mentality at the time. And there's going to an all-men's faith-based program, like reinventing my connection with my higher power.
Yeah.
I choose to call mine God. And so I tell people, look, man, I said, find me somebody whose life got worse because they found God. Find me somebody, say a couple prayers, see if your life changes. That's it. It doesn't take much to say a couple prayers, see if your life changes, take a chance. You owe it to yourself. A lot of people, myself included, going into treatment, right? I thought it was selfish that I was going into treatment, right? Well, it's the perfect time to be selfish.
Yeah.
The reality of it is like your family's going to be happy knowing that you're someplace safe. When you're in treatment or you're in jail, like they know where you're at, they're happy. When you're on the street, they're scared, they're nervous. So like, get your ass into treatment. I'm pretty blunt and pretty, frank about it. And because that's how it was done to me.
Yeah.
That's how I am as a sponsor. People don't like it. I get fired as a sponsor all the time. I do. Well, because I'm blunt. Like I said, I'm frank. Mine was 90 phone calls, 90 days. You miss a phone call, that 90 days restarts. It's just how it is. So it's about discipline. We owe it to ourselves. take a chance, because you never know what it's going to look like. I know plenty of people who literally had nothing and now they have families, they have homes. We're resourceful people. We're smart people. That's what the outside world doesn't understand, I don't think. They just think that we're hopeless drug addicts, but inside there's a very smart person, resourceful people, who can really make a change, a bigger impact as well than I think what we call normies. So.
Oh, well, and that's what you're doing now, dude.
Yeah, trying.
Well, look, I appreciate it, man. I really do. Thank you for your time. I'll shoot you a link when this comes up, but I can't thank you enough for, it's one of those deals where I know I feel a lot better now than I did before I started talking with you. So
yeah,
it's working, brother.
Yeah. Hell yeah, man. I appreciate you.
You got it, man. I'll be in touch.
All righty. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it, dude.
All right.
Thanks so much for listening to the Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production. In a world where dreams meet reality, there exists a place where your business can flourish. That place is Shopify. Imagine having the power to craft your online store with tools that make it as easy as a gentle breeze. Whether you're an artisan of handmade wonders, a creator of digital treasures, or a curator of the latest trends, Shopify stands by your side. With its customizable templates, seamless integrations, and support that's always there, your dream store is just a heartbeat away. Join millions of visionaries around the globe and let Shopify guide you on your journey. Visit roguemedianetwork.com/Shopify. That's roguemedianetwork.com/SHOPIFY. And embark on your free trial. Shopify, where your commerce dreams come to life.